الحمد لله استهل بالحمد خير ما نزل إليك خمسا تبدأ.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Honorable listeners, today we discuss the 21st juz of the Quran, Utlu ma uhiya ilayka min al-kitabi wa aqimis salah. This is a continuation of Surah Al-Ankabut. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, in the last juz, the last portion of the 20th juz, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala spoke about how feeble the plans, the plots, and the fraternity of the disbelievers and the enemies of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is in comparison to the greatness of Allah. And Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala akined it to Baytul Ankabut, like the web of the spider. Now in the opening ayat of the 21st juz, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala addresses our Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam very directly. Utlu ma uhiya ilayka min al-kitab. O Muhammadur Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, recite what has been revealed to you of the kitab, of the Quran. Number 2, wa aqimis salah, and continue performing your salah. So here Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala speaks about the benefits of salah. Inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar, that certainly salat negates fahsha, shamelessness, immodesty, and also evil deeds. Ulama have written that in salah we find 3 conditions. One is the quality and the condition of sincerity. If a person performs one salah with sincerity only and solely for the sake of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Number 2, fear of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, that one performs salat understanding, comprehending, recognizing the greatness of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. And number 3, salah comprises of dhikrullah, that is the Quran Sharif. When these 3 are found, then we will find that that salah will have an effect on that individual, that it will prevent the person from ill, from sin, from the disobedience of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Going forward, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala speaks about our Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and him being a living miracle, that he was untutored by anyone else. وَمَا كُنْتَ تَتْلُو مِنْ قَبْلِهِ مِنْ كِتَابٍ وَلَا تَخُطُّهُ بِيَمِينِكَ, that you could not recite from any book, you could not write, but however, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala blessed you with nubuwwat, and of course, all the aspects of nubuwwat, the knowledge, the ilm, the hilm, the tolerance, and the character, and everything else, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala had blessed our Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Quran being a miracle, and our Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam being a miracle. That is how Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala presents 2 miracles to us. The last verse of Surah Al-Ankabut, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَمَعَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ, is in actual fact the crux of the entire surah, that person who strives in our path, in the path of Allah Ta'ala, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala says that we will certainly guide them on our paths. So the more a person strives, the more effort a person makes, the more a person becomes obedient to Allah Rabbul Izzat, subdues his passions and evil desires, the closer a person will become to Allah Rabbul Izzat. It is as though Allah Ta'ala is saying that if you remove sin from your life and you become obedient to me, I will hold your hand and you will be able to walk this path of Sirat-e Mustaqim. The next surah, Surah Rum, is a Makki surah. It was revealed before the hijrah of our Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Now, around the Arabian Peninsula were 2 great empires, the Roman and the Persian Empire, and both these empires were at loggerheads. And it was a time when the Roman Empire was going through many internal and external difficulties. There was corruption internally, externally the Persians were always threatening, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about a victory that will come. Allah ta'ala says, Ghulibati Rome, that Rome was overpowered by the Persians when the war had taken place. But in another few years, in a period of 9 years, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant dominance to the Romans over the Persians. And this prediction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was 100%. And this shows the truth of the Quran Sharif. And why this was so relevant in Makkah Mukarramah is because the Persians were fire worshippers, and the Quraysh of Makkah were supporting, and they were happy when the victory of the Persians had come in the first instance. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has shown the truth of the Quran Sharif. Thereafter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about 7 different aspects of the proofs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's greatness. And then we find that after Surah Rum is Surah Luqman. This again is a Makki surah, and like Surah Rum and Surah Ankabut before, it begins with the letters Alif, Lam, Mim. In this surah, again Allah ta'ala speaks about His greatness, but here more especially Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the advice that Sayyidina Luqman alayhi salatu wassalam had offered to his son. And these are essentially 5 advices in a nutshell. And Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala says, وَإِذْ قَالَ لُقْمَانُ لِابْنِهِ وَهُوَ يَعِظُهُ يَا بُنَيَّ لَا تُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ. That when he advised his son, the first advice he had given, that, "O my son, do not ascribe partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." In other words, be very meticulous and very particular about the worship of one Allah, and that will be that your success in this world and in the hereafter. Thereafter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's greatness. Ya bunayya innaha in taku mithqala habbatin min khardalin fatakun fi sakhratin aw fi samawati aw fil ard ya'ti biha Allah. The greatness and the qudrat of Allah Rabbul Izzat, and also the establishment of the day of Qiyamah. And then turning towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is performance of salah. Ya bunayya aqimis salah, establish your salah. Wa'mur bil ma'roof wanha anil munkar, continue going out and establishing and commanding the good, and prohibit the evil. Wasbir ala ma asabak, and also whatever difficulties befall you, then persevere in those difficulties. وَلَا تُسَاعِرْ خَدَّكَ لِلنَّاسِ وَلَا تَمْشِ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا. That is a prohibition from pride and ostentation. And the 5th advice he gives to his son is with regards to good character. This surah, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala speaks at the end of the surah about the very important aspect about our limited knowledge in comparison to the unlimited knowledge of Allah. Inna Allah indahu ilmu sa'a, that certainly only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has knowledge about the day of Qiyamah. Wa yunazzilul ghayth, and Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala sends down the rain. It is not the doings of any individual, and collectively man, the whole world and all the technology can come together, but they cannot produce a single raindrop, and hence not even a drop of water. وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْأَرْحَامِ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that being that has full and absolute knowledge about the fetus in the womb. This is not only about revealing the gender, but this is about the human that will come out of the womb and be ushered into this world. What will be the person's character, the lifespan, the sustenance, and everything else to do with that human being. وَمَا تَدْرِي نَفْسٌ مَاذَا تَكْسِبُ غَدًا, and no soul knows what he will earn tomorrow. That is in the knowledge of Allah. وَمَا تَدْرِي نَفْسٌ بِأَيِّ أَرْضٍ تَمُوتُ, and no soul knows in which land it will die. That is also in the knowledge of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And then Surah As-Sajdah, this is also a Makki surah, and in it Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala speaks about again the various aspects of our Iman. وَلَوْ تَرَى إِذِ الْمُجْرِمُونَ نَاكِسُوا رُؤُوسِهِمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ رَبَّنَا أَبْصَرْنَا وَسَمِعْنَا فَارْجِعْنَا نَعْمَلْ صَالِحًا إِنَّا مُوقِنُونَ. This ayah sums up what the condition of an individual who disbelieved in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what would be his situation. He will beseech Allah on the day of Qiyamah. We have seen, we have heard, we've seen what Qiyamah is all about. We have heard what this Hisab and Kitab is all about. Farji'na, O Allah, send us back. Na'mal salihan, inna muqinun. Certainly now we have yaqeen. But obviously that yaqeen is too late, and that is not acceptable by Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And then Surah Al-Ahzab. Surah Al-Ahzab is a Madani surah. Al-Ahzab will refer to the Confederates, the allied forces that had marched on to Medina Munawwara in the lifetime of our Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was the 5th year of the Hijrah when the allied forces had come to the outskirts of Medina Munawwara. When Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam had heard about it, we know famously he made mashwara with the Sahaba. He consulted Sayyidina Farsi radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, suggested the digging of the trench, and that kept them away. But the very important aspect of the surah is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala differentiates between the mu'minun, that is the true sincere believers, and the munafiqun, and hence Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about them. وَإِذْ يَقُولُ الْمُنَافِقُونَ وَالَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ مَا وَعَدَنَا اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ إِلَّا غُرُورًا. The munafiqun, the hypocrites, and those who had illnesses and sicknesses in their hearts, they said Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam had only promised us beguilement, deception, and Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam had deceived us. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the believers, and what was the believers, what was their situation. Allah Rabbul Izzat says, Minal mu'minina rijalun sadaqu ma ahadullah alayhi فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَضَى نَحْبَهُ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَنْتَظِرُ وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks so glowingly of the believers that they had fulfilled their covenant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There were those who fulfilled the covenant, there were those who were still waiting. وَلَمَّا رَأَى الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الْأَحْزَابَ قَالُوا هَذَا مَا وَعَدَنَا اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَصَدَقَ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَمَا زَادَهُمْ إِلَّا إِيمَانًا وَتَسْلِيمًا. Unlike the munafiqeen, when the real and true believers had seen what was going on at the time of Ahzab, they said, Allah and His Rasul had promised us this, they fulfilled this promise, and this only increased them in their quality of Iman and the firmness of Iman. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grant us the strength of our Iman, and may Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala keep us steadfast on our Iman till the day we leave this world. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.
بالحمد حين تقرأ بالحمد حين تقرأ